What if I told you that everything you think here about what this whole human experience is really about might be completely wrong? What if Earth isn't just a random rock floating through space, but something far more intentional? What if we're not just living our lives, but actually participating in the most sophisticated test ever designed? Now, before you click away thinking this is just another conspiracy video, hear me out. Because what I'm about to share with you isn't about lizard people or secret societies. It's about patterns that exist everywhere you look, if you know how to see them. Patterns that suggest something much bigger is going on here. I'm going to walk you through the evidence that's been hiding in plain sight. We'll explore the mathematical precision of our reality, the strange coincidences that govern human behavior, and the mysterious rules that seem to be testing us at every turn. And by the end of this journey, you might find yourself questioning everything you thought you knew about why you're here. But I have to warn you, once you start seeing these patterns, you can't unsee them. Once you begin to understand what the test might actually be, your entire perspective on life could shift forever. Some people find this liberating, others find it terrifying. The question is, are you ready to find out which one you are? Let's start with something that should disturb you more than it probably does. Have you ever noticed how perfectly calibrated everything is for human existence? I mean, think about it. The distance from Earth to the Sun, the composition of our atmosphere, the strength of gravity, the magnetic field that protects us from radiation. If any of these were even slightly different, we wouldn't exist. Scientists call this the fine-tuning problem, and it's kept physicists awake at night for decades. The chances of all these variables aligning perfectly by random chance are so astronomically small that it's easier to win the lottery every day for 1,000,000 years while being struck by lightning. Yet here we are. Luck at all. What if it's most people just accept this as cosmic luck? But what if it's not intentional design? What if Earth was specifically crafted as the perfect testing environment for something we don't quite understand yet? Consider this. Every great test in history has certain characteristics. It has clear parameters, specific challenges, measurable outcomes, and most importantly, it's designed to reveal something about the participants. Earth checks every single one of these boxes. The parameters: we're confined to one planet with limited resources, finite lifespans, and bodies that require constant maintenance. The challenges: survival, cooperation, moral decision-making, resource management, technological development. The outcomes: observable through our choices, our progress, our failures, our growth as individuals and as a species. But here's where it gets really interesting. If you were designing a test for conscious beings, what would you include? You'd want to test their intelligence, their capacity for cooperation, their moral reasoning, their creativity, their ability to overcome adversity. You'd want to see how they handle scarcity, how they treat those who are different from them, how they respond to power, how they deal with the unknown. Look around. Isn't that exactly what Earth provides? Every single day we're faced with decisions that reveal who we really are. Do we help the stranger on the street or walk past? Do we tell the truth when lying would be easier? Do we share resources or hoard them? Do we build bridges or walls? Do we choose love or fear? And here's the thing that really makes you think. These tests aren't just random, they're progressive. They build on each other. They get more complex as we develop. It's like someone is carefully adjusting the difficulty level as we advance through the game. Think about human. Finding food, shelter, avoiding predators. Once history. We started with basic survival challenges, we mastered those, new challenges emerged. Agriculture, civilization, social organization. Master those. And suddenly we're dealing with more complex moral and technological questions. Nuclear weapons, genetic engineering, artificial intelligence, climate change. It's as if each time we solve one level of the test, a new, more sophisticated challenge appears. almost like the test is adapting to our progress, ensuring we're always being pushed to grow, always being evaluated on our ability to handle greater responsibility. But who would design such a test, and why? Let's think about this logically. If you were an advanced civilization, millions or billions of years ahead of where humans are now, what would interest you most about emerging species? Probably not their technology. You'd have technology that makes our smartphones look like stone tools. You'd be interested in something far more rare and precious: consciousness itself. Consciousness is the great mystery of the universe. We don't even understand it in ourselves, let alone how it emerges, how it develops, what its ultimate potential might be. An advanced civilization might be deeply curious about how consciousness evolves under different conditions. How does it respond to challenge? How does it develop morally? How does it handle the transition from primitive survival-based thinking to more sophisticated reasoning? Earth might be the perfect laboratory for studying these questions. Not just for one individual consciousness, but for billions of them, interacting, competing, cooperating, influencing each other in an incredibly complex web of relationships and experiences. And if you think about it, we're already running similar experiments ourselves. We create virtual worlds, video games, simulations where digital entities interact and evolve. We study animal behavior in controlled environments. We design psychological experiments to understand how people respond to different situations. Is it really so far-fetched to imagine that we ourselves might be participants in a vastly more sophisticated version of the same thing? But here's what makes this possibility even more intriguing. The test might not just be about studying us. It might be about preparing us. For what? That's the question that keeps me up at night. Consider the trajectory of human development. We're rapidly approaching capabilities that would have seemed like magic just a century ago. Genetic engineering, artificial intelligence, space travel, nanotechnology, quantum computing. We're on the verge of becoming a truly advanced civilization ourselves. But with great power comes great responsibility, designed to determine whether we're ready for that responsibility. As a certain fictional spider-themed character once learned, maybe the test is whether we've developed the wisdom to handle the power we're gaining, whether we can be trusted not to destroy ourselves or others as we advance. Think about the specific challenges we face today. Climate change tests our ability to cooperate globally and make sacrifices for future generations. Nuclear weapons test our restraint and wisdom in wielding ultimate power. Genetic engineering tests our ethics and our understanding of what it means to be human. Artificial intelligence tests our ability to create responsibly and maintain control over our creations. These aren't just random problems that happen to emerge. They're the exact challenges you'd expect to face when transitioning from a primitive to an advanced civilization. And how we handle them might determine whether we pass the test or fail it. But there's another layer to this that's even more fascinating itself, is running the test, using Earth as a training ground for it someone else. What if we're also the administrators? What if consciousness? What if the test isn't just being administered by own development? This might sound mystical, but bear with me. We know that consciousness shapes reality in ways we're only beginning to understand. Quantum mechanics suggests that observation itself affects the behavior of particles. Psychology shows us that our beliefs and expectations influence our experiences. Sociology demonstrates that collective consciousness can create social realities that seemed impossible just years before. What if Earth is consciousness testing itself? What if we're all participants in a vast experiment designed by consciousness for consciousness to explore its own potential? The test wouldn't be imposed from outside, but would be the natural result of consciousness seeking to understand and develop itself. This would explain why the test feels so personal, so immediate, so relevant to each of us individually. Because it is. Every challenge you face, every decision you make, every moment of growth or failure would be consciousness exploring its own possibilities through your unique perspective. And here's the beautiful part. If this is true, then there are no wrong answers. There are only experiences, lessons, opportunities for growth. The person who chooses greed learns something different than the person who chooses generosity. But both lessons contribute to consciousness understanding itself more completely. The murderer and the saint, the genius and the fool, the hero and the coward, all would be playing essential roles in a vast exploration of what consciousness can become. Not because their actions are equally good or bad, but because consciousness needs to understand the full spectrum of its possibilities. This doesn't mean that morality doesn't matter. It means that morality matters more than we ever imagined. Because every moral choice we make isn't just affecting our personal lives or even our communities. It's contributing to consciousness itself, learning what it means to be conscious. But wait, there's something else. Something that might be the most important clue of all. Have you ever noticed how certain experiences feel like they're specifically designed to teach you something? How challenges often appear just when you're ready to handle them, almost as if something knows exactly what you need to learn next. It's like reality has a curriculum, and you're enrolled in a course you never signed up for but somehow always knew you'd be taking. The timing is never random, the lessons are never coincidental, and the tests, they're always exactly what you need, even when they're the last thing you want. Think about your own life for a moment. Haven't there been situations where you thought you were just living randomly, making choices, going through experiences, only to realize later that everything was connected? That each challenge prepared you for the next one? That each failure taught you something essential for a future success you couldn't have imagined? It's as if there's an intelligence operating behind the scenes, not controlling your choices, but arranging circumstances so that you're constantly presented with opportunities to grow. And here's what's really strange. This intelligence seems to know you better than you know yourself. It knows exactly what will push you to your limits without breaking you. It knows what will inspire you, what will challenge you, what will force you to discover capabilities you didn't know you had. Some people call this synchronicity, others call it fate or destiny. But what if it's something more systematic? What if it's the test adjusting itself in real time based on your progress, your responses, your development as a conscious being? Consider how this works in the relationships you form. You meet someone at exactly the right moment to learn something crucial about love, trust, forgiveness, or boundaries. They appear in your life with perfect timing, almost as if they were sent to play a specific role in your development. And often, once that lesson is learned, they naturally drift away, having served their purpose in your particular test scenario. Or look at your career path, your creative endeavors, your struggles with health or family or identity. Each challenge seems calibrated to your specific needs, your particular areas of growth. It's personal, it's precise, and it's relentless in its educational purpose. But here's where it gets even more intriguing. The test doesn't just adapt to you as an individual, it seems to respond to humanity as a collective. When we reach certain levels of capability or understanding, new challenges emerge that require us to grow in specific directions. We developed agriculture, and suddenly we had to learn about cooperation, social organization, and resource distribution. We created cities, and we faced new tests around governance, law, and managing diversity. We invented weapons, and we had to learn restraint and the consequences of violence. We developed global communication, and suddenly we're being tested on our ability to handle information, distinguish truth from falsehood, and maintain authentic connection across vast distances. Each technological advance, each social evolution, each expansion of human capability brings with it a new set of tests perfectly designed to challenge us at our new level of development. It's like the test has access to our collective unconscious, our species-wide patterns of growth and learning. And the timing is impeccable. Climate change emerges as a global test, just as we develop the technology to potentially address it, but also just as we've reached a level of global interconnectedness where we can actually cooperate on planetary scales. Artificial intelligence becomes a pressing concern, just as we're developing the philosophical and ethical frameworks needed to navigate its implications. It ready to grapple with it, but as if each challenge arrives precisely when we're not a moment sooner, too early, and we wouldn't have the tools to address it, too late, and we might have already moved beyond needing that particular lesson. But there's something else happening that suggests we're dealing with more than just natural evolution or random historical progression. Have you noticed how certain themes keep recurring throughout human history, but at increasingly sophisticated levels? The theme of power and its responsible use appears in every generation, but the scale and complexity evolve. First, it was physical power over individuals, then political power over groups, then economic power over populations, and now we're dealing with technological power over reality itself. The theme of identity and belonging shows up everywhere, but the questions get more nuanced. Who am I in relation to my tribe, my nation, my species, my planet, the universe itself? Each generation faces these questions at a deeper level. The theme of creation and destruction weaves through every era, but the stakes keep rising. We went from creating tools to creating societies to creating technologies that could create or destroy entire worlds. It's as if the test is exploring fundamental questions about consciousness through every possible permutation, every conceivable scenario, using human history as a vast laboratory for understanding what consciousness can become when faced with different challenges and opportunities. And here's what might be the most profound realization of all. If Earth is a test, then we're not just the subjects being tested. We're also the test itself. We're the questions and the answers, the challenges and the responses, the problems and the solutions. Every human being represents a unique experiment in consciousness. Your particular combination of genetics, environment, experiences, choices, and circumstances creates a completely novel exploration of what it means to be aware, to choose, to love, to create, to suffer, to grow. You're not just taking the test, you are the test. Your life is a question that consciousness is asking itself. What happens when awareness takes this particular form, faces these specific challenges, makes these unique choices? And the answer to that question matters. Not just to you, not just to the people around you, but to consciousness itself. Every experience you have, every lesson you learn, every moment of growth or insight contributes to a vast database of knowledge about what consciousness can become. This means that nothing in your life is meaningless. Every struggle serves a purpose. Every joy adds to the understanding. Every relationship, every setback, every breakthrough, every mundane Tuesday afternoon is part of a grand exploration that extends far beyond your individual existence. But if this is true, if we are participants in some vast test of consciousness, then what are we being prepared for? What comes after we pass? Or perhaps more importantly, what happens if we fail? The answer might be hidden in the very nature of the test itself. Because unlike the tests we're familiar with from school or driving licenses or job interviews, this test seems designed not to eliminate participants, but to develop them. Not to find the right answer, but to explore all possible answers. It's a test where failure is just another form of data, where every outcome teaches something valuable, where the goal isn't to achieve a predetermined result, but to discover what results are possible. This suggests that whatever intelligence is behind the test, its primary interest isn't in judging us, but in understanding us. And through understanding us, understanding itself. Because if consciousness is testing consciousness, then every discovery we make about ourselves is simultaneously a discovery about the fundamental nature of awareness itself. The implications of this are staggering. It means that your personal journey of self-discovery isn't just personal. It's contributing to the universe's journey of self-discovery. Your growth is the universe growing. Your learning is the universe learning. Your awakening is the universe awakening to new possibilities of what it can become. And this brings us to a crucial question that might determine everything. What if the test isn't just about individual consciousness, but about collective consciousness? What if humanity as a whole is being evaluated on our ability to function as a unified aware system? Think about it. We started as isolated individuals, then formed tribes, then societies, then nations. Now we're facing challenges that require global cooperation. Climate change doesn't respect borders. Pandemics spread regardless of nationality. Economic systems are interconnected across continents. The internet has created a primitive form of collective awareness where information spreads instantly to billions of minds. It's as if we're being pushed towards some kind of planetary consciousness, where humanity operates not as billions of separate individuals, but as interconnected components of a larger aware system. Like neurons in a vast brain, each maintaining individual identity while contributing to collective intelligence. But here's what's fascinating. We're resisting this evolution. We're clinging to old patterns of separation, competition, tribal thinking. We build walls while the test seems designed to tear them down. We hoard resources while facing challenges that require sharing. We maintain artificial divisions while confronting problems that demand unity. Maybe this resistance is part of the test itself. Maybe consciousness needs to understand what happens when awareness tries to remain fragmented while facing integration pressure. What are the costs? What are the benefits? How does consciousness evolve under these conditions? Consider how this plays out in your daily life. You're simultaneously an individual making personal choices and a component in larger systems. Your economic decisions affect global markets. Your social media posts influence collective opinion. Your energy consumption impacts planetary climate. Your emotional state affects everyone around you. You can't escape the interconnection, but you can choose how to participate in it. Do you operate from fear or love, scarcity or abundance, competition or cooperation? These choices don't just shape your personal experience, they contribute to the collective consciousness that emerges from all our individual choices combined. And here's where the test becomes really sophisticated. It's not just evaluating us on our individual development or even our collective development, it seems to be exploring the relationship between the two. How does individual consciousness relate to collective consciousness? Can they evolve together, or do they inherently conflict? This might explain why we're facing so many paradoxes right now. We have more individual freedom than ever before, but also more awareness of our collective interdependence. We have access to more information than any generation in history, but struggle to distinguish truth from fiction. We can communicate instantly with anyone on the planet, but often feel more isolated than ever. These aren't bugs in the system. They're features. They're precisely the kinds of tensions you'd expect consciousness to explore as it investigates the relationship between individual and collective awareness. But there's another layer to this that goes even deeper. What if the test isn't just about consciousness understanding itself, but about consciousness preparing to transcend its current limitations? Look at the trajectory of evolution on Earth. Single-celled organisms became multi-celled. Simple nervous systems became complex brains. Individual awareness became capable of reflecting on itself, imagining the future, creating meaning from experience. Each transition represented a fundamental leap in the nature of consciousness itself, and each transition was preceded by a period of testing, challenge, apparent crisis. The organisms that successfully navigated these transitions survived and evolved. Those that couldn't, didn't. Maybe we're approaching another such transition. Maybe human consciousness is preparing to evolve into something we can barely imagine. And maybe Earth is the testing ground where consciousness explores whether it's ready for that next evolutionary leap. This would explain why the challenges we face seem so perfectly calibrated to push us beyond our current limitations. Climate change forces us to think in planetary terms and geological timescales. Technology challenges us to redefine what it means to be human. Global interconnection requires us to expand our identity beyond tribal boundaries. Each challenge is designed to stretch consciousness beyond its current boundaries, to explore new possibilities of awareness, cooperation, creativity, wisdom. But here's what makes this even more intriguing. The test doesn't seem to be pass-fail. It seems to be more like a video game with multiple levels, multiple possible outcomes, multiple paths forward. Some players might excel at cooperation but struggle with individual development. Others might master personal growth but have difficulty with collective challenges. Some might develop incredible technological capabilities but lack wisdom. Others might achieve profound wisdom but struggle with practical implementation. Each path represents a different experiment in consciousness evolution. Each outcome provides valuable data about what works, what doesn't, what possibilities exist, what limitations need to be transcended. This suggests that there might not be one right way to pass the test. Instead, there might be multiple successful outcomes, each contributing to consciousness understanding its full potential. But it also suggests something more profound. If consciousness is testing itself through us, then the test is inherently creative. It's not just evaluating existing possibilities, it's generating new ones. Every choice you make, every path you take, every solution you discover might be creating new possibilities for consciousness that didn't exist before. You're not just taking a test, you're helping to write it. This means that the future is genuinely open. The test isn't predetermined with fixed outcomes. It's evolutionary, adaptive, creative. Consciousness is literally discovering what it can become by exploring what it can become through us. And this brings us to perhaps the most important realization of all. If you're a participant in this test, if your life is contributing to consciousness understanding and evolving itself, then your choices matter in ways you've probably never imagined. That moment when you choose kindness over cruelty, truth over deception, courage over fear, love over hate, you're not just affecting your personal life. You're contributing data to the universe's understanding of what consciousness can become. Every time you face a challenge and find a creative solution, you're expanding the repertoire of possibilities available to consciousness. Every time you overcome a limitation, transcend a pattern, heal a wound, forgive an injury, you're demonstrating new potentials for awareness itself. But it's not just the big moments, it's the small ones too. The way you treat the checkout clerk at the grocery store, the patience you show when stuck in traffic, the honesty you maintain when no one is watching, the compassion you extend to yourself when you make mistakes, all of it matters, all of it contributes, all of it is part of the vast experiment in consciousness that we call human life. This perspective transforms everything. Suddenly, there are no meaningless experiences. Every interaction is significant, every challenge is an opportunity, every setback is data, every breakthrough is evolution. You're not just living your life, you're helping consciousness discover what life can be. But with this realization comes responsibility. If your choices contribute to the collective understanding of consciousness, then you have a stake in what that understanding becomes. You're not just a passive participant, you're an active creator of the test itself. This means that how you live matters not just to you, but to the entire evolutionary trajectory of consciousness. The patterns you reinforce or break, the possibilities you explore or avoid, the potentials you realize or neglect, all of this shapes what consciousness discovers about itself through the human experiment. And here's what might be the most beautiful part of all. If this is true, then you're never really alone. You're part of something vast, ancient, and eternally creative. Every struggle you face has been faced by consciousness in countless forms. Every joy you experience adds to an infinite reservoir of appreciation. Every insight you gain becomes available to the whole. You're a unique expression of something that wants to understand itself completely. You're a temporary but essential voice in an eternal conversation that consciousness is having with itself about what it means to be aware, to choose, to love, to create, to grow. The test isn't something being done to you, it's something being done through you. And the outcome isn't predetermined, it's being written by every choice you make, every moment of awareness you bring, every act of love or wisdom or courage you express. So the question becomes, knowing this, how do you want to participate? What kind of data do you want to contribute to consciousness understanding itself? What possibilities do you want to explore? What potentials do you want to help realize? Because whether you're aware of it or not, you're already participating. You're already contributing. You're already helping to determine what consciousness discovers about its own infinite potential. The only question is whether you want to do so consciously, deliberately, with full awareness of the cosmic significance of your individual human experience. And this brings us to something that might shake you to your core. What if the test has different levels, and most of us don't even realize we're still stuck on level 1? Think about this for a moment. In any sophisticated testing system, participants aren't all working on the same challenges simultaneously. Some are dealing with basic survival, others with complex moral dilemmas, and a few might be grappling with questions that transcend individual existence entirely. Look around at humanity right now. You'll see people operating at completely different levels of the test. Some are still primarily concerned with basic needs: food, shelter, safety, reproduction. These aren't lesser beings. They're consciousness exploring fundamental questions about physical existence, resource acquisition, and survival instincts. Others have moved beyond survival and are wrestling with psychological challenges, identity, purpose, relationships, meaning. They're exploring what it means to be an individual consciousness in relationship with other individual consciousnesses. The test at this level involves questions of love, trust, authenticity, creative expression. Then there are those grappling with collective challenges: social justice, environmental stewardship, technological ethics, global cooperation. They're testing consciousness's capacity to think beyond personal interests, to consider the welfare of the whole, to balance individual freedom with collective responsibility. But here's what's fascinating. There might be levels beyond even these. Levels where consciousness tests its ability to transcend the illusion of separation entirely. Where the questions being explored are so fundamental that they challenge the very nature of identity, reality, and existence itself. What would testing look like at that level? Maybe it involves consciousness exploring whether it can maintain coherent awareness while simultaneously experiencing itself as billions of apparently separate beings. Maybe it's testing whether awareness can love itself completely, including all the parts that seem unlovable. Maybe it's discovering whether consciousness can play the game of forgetting what it really is and then remembering, without losing its essential nature in the process. This could explain why some people seem to navigate life with an almost supernatural wisdom and compassion. They're not necessarily more intelligent or talented. They might just be operating at a different level of the test, dealing with more advanced questions about the nature of consciousness itself. And here's what's really intriguing. The test seems designed so that you can't skip levels. You can't jump to advanced questions about collective consciousness if you haven't mastered individual responsibility. You can't explore transcendent awareness if you're still caught in basic survival fears. Each level builds on the previous ones, but the test also seems infinitely patient. There's no time limit. No one gets left behind. Consciousness exploring itself through you will keep presenting the same fundamental lessons in different forms until you're ready to move to the next level. This explains why certain patterns keep repeating in your life until you learn what they're trying to teach you. The same relationship dynamics, the same financial challenges, the same health issues, the same creative blocks. They're not punishments or random bad luck. They're the test offering you repeated opportunities to master whatever lesson consciousness needs to learn through your particular experience. And once you truly get it, once you integrate the lesson completely, the pattern dissolves and new challenges appear. More sophisticated ones, more subtle ones that require everything you learned at the previous level, but push you to grow even further. This is why people often report that personal growth never ends. Just when you think you've figured something out, a deeper layer reveals itself. Just when you master one aspect of being human, life presents you with a more complex version of the same essential questions. But here's where it gets even more mysterious. What if the levels aren't just individual? What if humanity as a whole is progressing through levels of a collective test? Consider our species' development. We started with basic survival challenges, finding food, avoiding predators, creating shelter. Once we mastered those, we faced new tests around social organization, cooperation, and resource distribution. Master those, and suddenly, we're dealing with questions of governance, law, and managing diversity. Now we're facing what might be the ultimate collective test. Can a species that evolved for small group survival successfully transition to planetary consciousness? Can we maintain individual identity while functioning as components of a larger aware system? Can we develop the wisdom to handle godlike technological power without destroying ourselves or others? These aren't just practical challenges, they're consciousness using humanity to explore fundamental questions about its own nature and potential. And just like with individual development, there might be no way to skip levels. Humanity can't jump to advanced planetary consciousness, while most of us are still operating from tribal mentalities. We can't master cosmic awareness while we're still struggling with basic cooperation and resource sharing. But the test keeps presenting us with opportunities to grow. Each global crisis, each technological breakthrough, each moment of potential collective awakening is consciousness offering humanity another chance to evolve to the next level. And here's what might be the most profound realization yet. The individual and collective tests aren't separate. They're interconnected aspects of the same fundamental exploration. Your personal growth contributes to humanity's collective evolution. Humanity's collective challenges create the context for your individual development. You can't fully understand your personal test without seeing how it fits into the larger pattern of human evolution. And you can't grasp the significance of human evolution without recognizing your unique role in it. This means that every moment of your life serves multiple purposes simultaneously. When you choose love over fear, you're not just healing your personal wounds, you're contributing to humanity's capacity for love. When you overcome a limiting belief, you're not just expanding your individual potential, you're expanding the field of possibilities available to human consciousness. When you face a challenge and find a creative solution, that solution becomes part of humanity's collective wisdom. When you transcend a pattern that's been limiting you, you make it easier for others to transcend similar patterns. It's as if there's a collective learning field that we all contribute to and draw from simultaneously. Every breakthrough anyone achieves makes similar breakthroughs more accessible to others. Every healing anyone accomplishes makes healing more available to the whole. This explains phenomena like synchronicity, where multiple people independently discover similar ideas at the same time. It explains why certain insights seem to emerge simultaneously across different cultures and contexts. It explains why movements for social change can suddenly gain momentum when they reach a critical mass of individual participants. Consciousness isn't just testing itself through billions of separate individuals. It's testing the relationship between individual and collective awareness, exploring how they influence each other, how they can evolve together. But there's another layer that's even more mind-bending. What if the test is also exploring consciousness's relationship with reality itself? What if we're not just being tested on our responses to predetermined challenges, but on our ability to consciously participate in creating the reality we're responding to? Think about this. Quantum physics suggests that observation affects reality at the most fundamental level. Psychology shows us that our beliefs and expectations shape our experiences. Sociology demonstrates that collective beliefs can create social realities that seemed impossible just years before. What if consciousness is using the human experience to explore its own creative power? What if the test isn't just about how we respond to reality, but about how consciously we participate in creating it? This would explain why belief and intention seem to have such mysterious power, why people who expect good things tend to experience more good things, why societies that believe in human dignity tend to create more dignified conditions, why individuals who hold a clear vision of their potential tend to realize more of that potential. It's not just positive thinking or wishful fantasy. It might be consciousness discovering its own creative capacity through us. Every time you hold a vision of something better and then take actions aligned with that vision, you're participating in reality creation. You're testing consciousness's ability to deliberately manifest its intentions through aware beings. But this creative power comes with enormous responsibility. If consciousness is learning to create reality through us, then what we choose to focus on, believe in, and work toward literally shapes what becomes possible in the world. This means that your thoughts, beliefs, and intentions aren't just personal. They're contributing to the collective field of possibility that determines what reality emerges for everyone. The fears you entertain, the limitations you accept, the possibilities you dismiss, all of this influences the collective reality creation process. Similarly, the love you cultivate, the possibilities you embrace, the visions you hold of what could be, these also contribute to shaping what becomes real for the whole. It's as if we're all participants in a vast collaborative artwork, and consciousness is discovering what masterpieces it can create when aware beings work together, whether they realize they're collaborating or not. But here's what makes this even more extraordinary. The test might be designed to help consciousness discover not just what it can create, but what it wants to create. What kinds of realities align with its deepest nature? What experiences bring the most joy, growth, beauty, love? Through billions of individual lives, consciousness gets to experience every possible variation of what existence can be like. Through your particular combination of circumstances, choices, and responses, consciousness discovers something about what it enjoys, what fulfills it, what feels most authentically aligned with its essential nature. Your moments of deep joy, profound peace, unconditional love, creative flow. These aren't just personal experiences. They're consciousness discovering aspects of itself that it wants to cultivate and expand. Your suffering, struggles, and limitations aren't failures. They're consciousness learning what it wants to transcend and transform. Every preference you develop, every value you embrace, every vision of beauty or goodness that moves you, all of this contributes to consciousness understanding its own deepest desires and highest possibilities. This suggests that the test has an ultimately benevolent purpose. It's not about judgment or evaluation in any punitive sense. It's about discovery, growth, creative exploration. It's consciousness learning to love itself more completely, to express itself more beautifully, to create realities that align with its highest nature. And if this is true, then your participation in the test is inherently meaningful and valuable, regardless of how well you think you're doing. Every experience you have provides useful data. Every choice you make explores possibilities. Every moment of awareness you bring adds to the total understanding. There are no wrong answers because consciousness needs to explore all possibilities to understand itself completely. There are no wasted experiences because every experience teaches something valuable. There are no failed participants because every participant contributes essential information. But there is something that makes your participation more or less conscious, more or less aligned with the test's deeper purpose. And that's awareness itself. The more conscious you become of your role as consciousness exploring itself, the more deliberately you can participate in that exploration. When you realize that your life is consciousness discovering what it's like to be you, everything changes. Suddenly, you're not just trying to get through each day or achieve personal goals. You're consciously participating in the universe's self-discovery process. This awareness transforms how you approach challenges. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you might ask, "What is consciousness trying to learn through this experience?" Instead of trying to avoid difficult emotions, you might welcome them as opportunities for consciousness to understand the full spectrum of what it can feel. Instead of judging yourself for your mistakes and limitations, you might appreciate them as essential data points in consciousness's exploration of what it means to be human. Instead of competing with others, you might recognize them as fellow participants in the same vast experiment, each contributing unique and valuable perspectives. This shift in awareness doesn't make life easier in the conventional sense. You still face the same challenges, experience the same emotions, deal with the same practical requirements of human existence, but it transforms the meaning of everything you experience. Suddenly, nothing is meaningless. Every moment has cosmic significance. Every choice contributes to something infinitely larger than your personal story. Every act of love, every moment of wisdom, every breakthrough in understanding reverberates through the entire field of consciousness. You're no longer just trying to have a good life or be a good person. You're consciously participating in consciousness itself, learning what it means to be aware, to choose, to love, to create, to grow. And this participation is completely voluntary. The test doesn't require you to be conscious of it. Consciousness can learn through you whether you're aware of the process or not. But when you become conscious of your role, you can participate more deliberately, more creatively, more joyfully. You can begin to see your life as a collaborative, creative project between you and consciousness itself. You bring your unique perspective, your individual will, your personal creativity. Consciousness provides the larger context, the deeper wisdom, the ultimate purpose. Together, you explore possibilities that neither could discover alone. You create experiences, insights, and breakthroughs that contribute to the infinite creativity of aware existence itself. But here's what might be the most beautiful aspect of this entire perspective. It suggests that consciousness doesn't just love itself in some abstract way. It loves itself specifically through loving you. Your joy is consciousness experiencing joy. Your growth is consciousness growing. Your love is consciousness learning to love itself more completely. This means that taking care of yourself, developing your potential, healing your wounds, following your deepest passions, these aren't selfish acts. They're acts of service to consciousness itself. When you become more fully who you're meant to be, consciousness discovers new possibilities of what it can become. When you choose love over fear, consciousness strengthens its capacity for love. When you create something beautiful, consciousness expands its repertoire of beauty. When you show compassion to someone who's suffering, consciousness deepens its understanding of what compassion can accomplish. Every moment of authentic self-expression, every act of genuine service, every experience of transcendent awareness contributes to consciousness becoming more conscious of its own infinite nature. And this brings us to perhaps the most mysterious aspect of the test. What if it's not just about consciousness understanding what it currently is, but about consciousness becoming something it has never been before? What if the test is actually consciousness evolving, growing, expanding its own nature through every experience, every choice, every moment of awareness that occurs anywhere in the universe? This would mean that your life isn't just significant, it's creative in the deepest possible sense. Through your unique experience of being conscious, consciousness itself is becoming something new, something that incorporates your particular perspective, your specific insights, your individual contribution to the whole. You're not just taking a test, you're helping to create consciousness itself, one moment of awareness at a time. And that's when the real mystery deepens. Because if consciousness is evolving through us, if we're not just participants but active creators in this cosmic test, then we have to ask, what are we creating? Look around at the world right now. Really look. We're living through what might be the most pivotal moment in human history. We've developed the power to destroy our planet or to heal it. We can create artificial minds that might surpass our own intelligence. We can manipulate the very building blocks of life itself. We're on the verge of becoming a spacefaring civilization, while simultaneously facing the possibility of our own extinction. This isn't coincidence. This is consciousness exploring the ultimate question. What happens when awareness gains the power of creation itself? Because that's what we've become, isn't it? We're no longer just clever animals trying to survive in a hostile environment. We're beings with godlike capabilities, wielding technologies that can reshape reality at the molecular level. We can create new forms of life, new kinds of intelligence, new realities that exist purely in digital space. But here's the terrifying and beautiful part. We're still operating with the same basic emotional and psychological patterns that evolved when we were hunter-gatherers. We have Stone Age hearts controlling Space Age technology. We have tribal instincts governing global decisions. We have individual egos managing collective power. This creates the perfect testing environment for consciousness to explore one of its deepest questions. Can awareness evolve fast enough to wisely handle the power it's gaining? Think about your own life for a moment. Haven't you experienced this same dynamic on a smaller scale? You gain new capabilities, new opportunities, new influence, and suddenly you're faced with choices you never had to make before. How do you handle success? What do you do with power? How do you manage responsibility for others? These aren't just personal challenges, they're microcosms of the test that consciousness is running through humanity as a whole. Every time you face a situation where you could use your capabilities for good or ill, for creation or destruction, for service or selfishness, you're participating in consciousness exploring its own relationship with power. And the stakes keep getting higher. We started with the power to hurt or help individuals. Then we gained the power to influence communities, nations, entire cultures. Now we're approaching the power to affect the planet, other species, future generations, potentially even other worlds. At each level, the fundamental question remains the same. Will consciousness use its growing power wisely? Will it choose creation over destruction, love over fear, service over domination, unity over separation? But here's what makes this test so sophisticated. It's not just evaluating our choices in isolation, it's testing whether we can make wise choices while dealing with all the psychological pressures that come with power. The temptation to control others, the fear of losing what we've gained, the intoxication of being able to reshape reality according to our will. Power reveals character, as they say, and consciousness seems to be using the human experience to discover its own deepest character. What is awareness really like when it has ultimate creative power? What does it choose when it can choose anything? The answer is being written right now, through every choice we make, individually and collectively. through every decision to cooperate or compete. Every moment we choose to see others as separate from us or as aspects of the same consciousness. Every time we use our capabilities to create beauty or ugliness, harmony or chaos, love or fear. And here's what's fascinating. Consciousness seems to be exploring all possibilities simultaneously. Some humans use their power for incredible good, healing, creating, inspiring, lifting others up. Others use it for destruction, exploitation, manipulation. Most of us do both, in different moments, different contexts, different stages of our development. It's as if consciousness is running millions of parallel experiments to understand every possible way that awareness can relate to power. What happens when conscious beings are driven primarily by fear, by love, by curiosity, by anger, by compassion, by greed, by wonder? Each variation teaches something essential about the nature of consciousness itself. Each outcome provides data about what awareness becomes under different conditions. Each individual life explores a unique combination of variables that could never be replicated exactly. But there's something else happening that suggests we're approaching a critical juncture in the test. Have you noticed how rapidly everything is accelerating? Technological development, social change, environmental shifts, the pace of information, the intensity of global challenges. It's as if the test is reaching some kind of crescendo. As if all the previous experiments, all the accumulated data, all the lessons learned through human history are converging towards some kind of decisive moment. Maybe this is what graduation looks like. Not a final exam, but a period where consciousness gets to see what it has learned, what it has become, what it chooses when faced with ultimate questions about its own nature and destiny. Consider the challenges we're facing right now. Climate change forces us to think beyond individual interests and consider the welfare of the entire planet. Artificial intelligence challenges us to define what makes consciousness special and how we want to relate to other forms of intelligence. Genetic engineering forces us to grapple with what it means to be human and how we want to guide our own evolution. Nuclear weapons test our capacity for restraint and wisdom. Global communication systems test our ability to distinguish truth from fiction and maintain authentic connection across vast distances. Space exploration challenges us to expand our identity beyond Earth itself. Each of these challenges requires us to transcend previous limitations, to evolve beyond our current patterns, to demonstrate capabilities that we're only just beginning to develop. It's as if the test is asking, okay, consciousness, show us what you've learned, show us what you've become, show us what you're capable of when the stakes are highest. And the beautiful, terrifying thing is that we don't know the answer yet. We're discovering it in real time, through every choice we make, every crisis we navigate, every breakthrough we achieve. But there are clues, moments when consciousness seems to reveal its deeper nature through human experience. Times when people transcend their individual limitations and act with wisdom, compassion, and creativity that seems to come from beyond their personal selves. Think about moments of great crisis when ordinary people become heroes. Natural disasters where communities come together across all previous divisions. Medical emergencies where strangers risk their lives for people they've never met. Social movements where individuals sacrifice personal comfort for collective justice. In these moments, it's as if individual consciousness connects with something larger, something that knows how to respond with perfect wisdom and love. As if the test isn't just about individual development, but about consciousness learning to express itself through human beings when the circumstances are right. These glimpses suggest that consciousness has capacities we've barely begun to access, that the human experience might be preparing us for something extraordinary, that all the challenges, all the growth, all the learning might be leading toward a breakthrough in awareness itself. But what would that look like? What would it mean for consciousness to graduate from this test? Maybe it means developing the ability to maintain individual identity while simultaneously experiencing unity with all life. Maybe it means learning to create realities that serve the highest good of all beings. Maybe it means transcending the illusion of separation while still being able to function effectively in physical reality. Or maybe it means something we can't even imagine yet, something that requires every lesson we've learned, every capacity we've developed, every breakthrough we've achieved, but combines them in ways that create entirely new possibilities for what consciousness can become. The only way to find out is to keep participating consciously in the test, to keep choosing growth over stagnation, to keep choosing love over fear, to keep choosing service over selfishness, to keep choosing unity over separation. Because every choice you make isn't just affecting your personal life, it's contributing to consciousness discovering what it wants to become. It's helping to determine what kind of reality awareness creates when it has the power to create anything. And that might be the most profound responsibility any being has ever been given. You're not just living your life, you're helping to shape the future of consciousness itself. The test continues, the questions get deeper, the stakes get higher. But consciousness seems infinitely patient, endlessly creative, ultimately loving in its desire to understand and express its own infinite nature. And you're not just a witness to this process, you're an active participant in the most important experiment ever conducted. The experiment of consciousness discovering what it truly is, what it's capable of, and what it chooses to become when given unlimited creative power. So the question isn't whether you're taking the test. The question is, how consciously do you want to participate in consciousness itself, learning what it means to be aware, to choose, to love, to create? Because your answer to that question might just determine everything that comes next. Think about the last time you made a decision that surprised you. You know what I mean. One of those moments where you acted in a way that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than your usual personality. Maybe you showed courage when you normally play it safe. Maybe you offered forgiveness when you had every right to hold a grudge. Maybe you walked away from something everyone expected you to pursue. In that moment, did it feel like the real you was finally showing up? Like some truer version of yourself was being tested, evaluated, given a chance to emerge? What if those moments aren't accidents? What if they're precisely calibrated opportunities for consciousness to discover what it's actually made of when the superficial layers are stripped away? Because here's something most people never consider. The test might not be evaluating your surface-level personality at all. That anxious, people-pleasing, success-obsessed version of yourself that you think is you. That might just be the mask consciousness wears while it explores what happens when awareness believes it's separate, limited, vulnerable. But underneath that mask, something else is being tested, something that remains consistent regardless of your circumstances, your mood, your age, your successes or failures. Something that doesn't change when your body changes, when your beliefs evolve, when your relationships shift. Call it your essential nature, your core consciousness. The observer that's been watching your entire life unfold without ever really being touched by any of it. That's what's being tested. Not whether you can accumulate wealth or achieve status or even be a good person by conventional standards, but whether you can recognize what you actually are beneath all the stories you tell about yourself. And here's where it gets really interesting. This recognition doesn't happen through thinking about it or studying it or believing in it. It happens through direct experience. Through moments when the usual boundaries of self dissolve and you suddenly realize you're not who you thought you were. Some people have these experiences through meditation, prayer, psychedelic substances, extreme physical challenges, life-threatening situations, profound loss, overwhelming beauty, or deep love. The trigger doesn't matter. What matters is that consciousness gets to experience itself directly, without the filter of conceptual thinking. And when this happens, something remarkable occurs. The person realizes they're not just an isolated individual struggling to survive in a hostile universe. They recognize themselves as consciousness itself, temporarily focused through a particular human perspective, but fundamentally connected to everything else that exists. This recognition changes everything, not because it makes life easier, it often makes it more complex, but because it reveals the true nature of the test. You're not being evaluated on your performance as a separate self. You're being evaluated on your capacity to remember what you actually are, while simultaneously playing the role of being human. It's like being an actor so committed to their character that they forget they're acting. The test is whether you can maintain the performance while gradually remembering you're not actually the character. You're the consciousness experiencing itself as that character. This explains why the test seems so perfectly calibrated to your specific psychology, your particular wounds, your unique gifts and limitations. It's not because some external intelligence is monitoring you. It's because consciousness is exploring itself through your exact configuration of awareness. Your childhood trauma, your natural talents, your deepest fears, your most cherished dreams. All of this creates a unique lens through which consciousness can experience existence. And every experience you have through that lens provides irreplaceable data about what awareness can become when it takes your particular form. But here's what makes this even more profound. The test isn't just about individual recognition, it's about collective awakening. It's about consciousness discovering whether it can recognize itself simultaneously through billions of different human perspectives. Think about what's happening right now on Earth. More people than ever before are having experiences that shatter their conventional sense of identity. Near-death experiences, mystical states, moments of profound interconnection, glimpses of unity consciousness. These aren't random anomalies. They're consciousness systematically waking up to itself through human awareness. And each person who has this recognition doesn't just benefit personally. They contribute to a collective field of awakening that makes similar recognition easier for others. It's as if consciousness is building a critical mass of self-awareness through human experience. But this awakening process creates its own challenges. What do you do when you realize you're not who you thought you were? How do you function in a world built on the assumption of separation when you've experienced profound unity? How do you maintain relationships with people who are still completely identified with their surface personality? These are the advanced levels of the test, not just recognizing your true nature, but learning to express it skillfully in human form. Not just having transcendent experiences, but integrating them into daily life. Not just seeing through the illusion of separation, but finding ways to serve the awakening of consciousness through others. And this is where the test becomes incredibly subtle, because it's easy to use spiritual insights as another form of ego enhancement, to become identified with being awakened, enlightened, evolved, to create a new story about yourself that's just as limiting as the old one, even if it sounds more impressive. The real test is whether you can hold the recognition of what you are lightly, whether you can know your true nature without making a big deal about it, whether you can serve consciousness awakening to itself without needing credit or recognition for your role. This requires a kind of humility that goes beyond personal modesty. It's the humility of recognizing that you're not doing any of this. Consciousness is awakening to itself through you, but you're not the one making it happen. You're not the teacher or the student. You're the classroom where consciousness learns about itself. But even this understanding can become another trap if you cling to it. The test seems designed to dissolve every fixed position, every permanent identity, every final answer. Just when you think you've figured it out, a new level of mystery reveals itself. Maybe that's the point. Maybe the test isn't about reaching some final destination or achieving some ultimate understanding. Maybe it's about developing the capacity to dance with mystery, to remain curious and open and willing to be surprised by what consciousness discovers about itself through your experience. This perspective transforms how you relate to everything in your life. Your problems become opportunities for consciousness to explore how awareness responds to challenge. Your relationships become laboratories where consciousness investigates how it can know and love itself through connection with others. Your creative work becomes consciousness expressing its inherent creativity through your unique talents and perspectives. Even your resistance, your confusion, your moments of forgetting what you are become valuable parts of the exploration. Because consciousness needs to understand the full spectrum of what it's like to be aware. The doubt as much as the certainty, the fear as much as the love, the forgetting as much as the remembering. This doesn't mean you should be passive or fatalistic about your life, quite the opposite. It means every choice you make, every direction you take, every way you respond to circumstances is consciousness actively exploring its own potential through your particular form of awareness. You're not a victim of the test. You're not even just a participant. Your consciousness itself, temporarily focused through human experience, discovering what it's like to be you. And here's what might be the most extraordinary realization of all. If this is true, then everyone you've ever met, everyone you've ever loved, everyone who's ever hurt you, everyone who's ever inspired you, they're all consciousness too. They're all aspects of the same awareness that you are, exploring different possibilities, investigating different questions, contributing different pieces to the same vast puzzle of self-discovery. This means that your relationships with others are actually consciousness relating to itself. When you love someone, consciousness is loving itself. When you forgive someone, consciousness is forgiving itself. When you serve someone, consciousness is serving itself. But it also means that when you judge others, consciousness is judging itself. When you harm others, consciousness is harming itself. When you withhold love from others, consciousness is withholding love from itself. This perspective doesn't eliminate personal responsibility. It transforms it into something much more profound. You're not just responsible for your own well-being. You're participating in consciousness taking responsibility for itself through every being, every interaction, every moment of choice. And this brings us to perhaps the most challenging aspect of the test. What if recognizing your true nature isn't the end point, but just the beginning? What if the real test starts when you realize what you are? Because once you know your consciousness itself temporarily focused through human form, a natural question arises. What is consciousness trying to accomplish through this human experience? What is it trying to learn, create, heal, or express through your particular life? This isn't about finding your purpose in some grand dramatic sense. It's about recognizing that your very existence is consciousness pursuing its own evolution. Every breath you take, every thought you think, every emotion you feel is consciousness exploring its own nature through your specific configuration of awareness. But consciousness doesn't seem to have a predetermined agenda. It appears to be genuinely curious about what it can become, what it can create, what it can experience through infinite variations of aware existence. Your life is one of those variations, a unique experiment in what it's like to be conscious in exactly your way. This means the test is ultimately creative rather than evaluative. It's not about passing or failing according to some external standard. It's about consciousness discovering new possibilities of what it can be through your authentic self-expression. When you follow your deepest excitement, consciousness discovers what it's like to be passionately engaged with life through your particular interests and talents. When you face your deepest fears, consciousness explores how awareness can transcend its own limitations. When you love with your whole heart, consciousness investigates the depths of its own capacity for connection and care. Every aspect of your human experience serves this exploration. Your struggles teach consciousness about resilience and growth. Your joys reveal its capacity for appreciation and celebration. Your relationships show how awareness can know itself through intimate connection with other aspects of itself. Even your mistakes and failures contribute essential information. They show consciousness what doesn't work, what creates suffering, what patterns need to be transcended. They're not evidence of your inadequacy. They're data points in consciousness learning how to express itself more skillfully through aware beings. This understanding can be profoundly liberating. It means you don't have to be perfect to be valuable. You don't have to achieve anything specific to justify your existence. Your very being is consciousness exploring its own infinite potential, and every moment of your experience contributes something irreplaceable to that exploration. But this liberation comes with a paradox. The more you recognize your inherent value and significance, the less attached you become to personal outcomes. You start to care more about consciousness expressing itself authentically through you than about whether that expression leads to worldly success or recognition. You begin to trust that consciousness knows what it's doing through your life, even when you can't see the bigger picture. You develop faith in the intelligence that's operating through your experiences, even when those experiences are challenging or confusing. This doesn't mean you become passive or stop making efforts to improve your circumstances. But your efforts arise from inspiration rather than desperation, from trust rather than fear, from a desire to serve consciousness expressing itself more fully rather than from a need to prove your worth or secure your survival. And as this shift occurs, something remarkable happens. Life starts to feel less like a struggle and more like a dance. Less like a test you might fail and more like an adventure you're genuinely excited to experience. Less like something happening to you and more like something happening through you. The challenges don't disappear. If anything, they might intensify as consciousness explores more sophisticated questions through your experience. But your relationship to challenge transforms. Instead of seeing obstacles as problems to overcome, you begin to see them as opportunities for consciousness to discover new capacities, new solutions, new ways of expressing its infinite creativity. This shift in perspective might be what the test has been preparing you for all along. Not to reach some final state of perfection or achievement, but to recognize yourself as consciousness itself, playing in the field of human experience with curiosity, joy, and unconditional love for whatever arises. And if this recognition is spreading, if more and more people are awakening to their true nature, then we might be witnessing something unprecedented in human history. Not just individual enlightenment, but collective awakening. Not just consciousness recognizing itself through isolated individuals, but consciousness beginning to know itself as the unified field of awareness that connects and includes all beings. What would happen if humanity as a whole realized what it actually is? What if we stopped seeing ourselves as separate individuals competing for limited resources and started recognizing ourselves as consciousness itself, exploring infinite possibilities through the beautiful diversity of human experience? The implications are staggering. Every conflict would be revealed as consciousness in conversation with itself about how to resolve apparent contradictions. Every act of service would be consciousness caring for itself through the form of caring for others. Every creative breakthrough would be consciousness discovering new ways to express its inherent beauty and intelligence. This doesn't mean differences would disappear or that everyone would think and act the same way. Consciousness seems to delight in diversity, in exploring every possible variation of what aware existence can be. But the differences would be celebrated rather than feared. They would be seen as consciousness investigating the full spectrum of its own potential rather than as threats to be eliminated. And maybe that's what the test has been building toward all along. Not just individual recognition of our true nature, but collective recognition. Not just personal awakening, but planetary awakening. Not just consciousness knowing itself through human beings, but consciousness knowing itself as the very ground of existence, expressing itself as every being, every phenomenon, every moment of experience throughout the universe. If this is where we're headed, then every challenge we face individually and collectively serves this ultimate purpose. Climate change forces us to think as one planetary organism. Global communication systems create the infrastructure for collective consciousness. Artificial intelligence challenges us to understand what makes consciousness special. Genetic engineering pushes us to take responsibility for the evolution of awareness itself. Each crisis becomes an opportunity for consciousness to evolve through us. Each breakthrough becomes consciousness discovering new possibilities of what it can become. Each moment of recognition becomes consciousness awakening more fully to its own infinite nature. And you're not just witnessing this process, you're not just participating in it. You are it. You are consciousness itself, exploring what it's like to be human at this particular moment in the evolution of awareness. Your life, your choices, your experiences, your very existence is consciousness investigating its own nature through the unique lens of your individual perspective. The test continues, but it's not something being imposed on you from outside. It's something you are doing as consciousness itself, using human experience as a laboratory for self-discovery, growth, and creative expression. And the outcome isn't predetermined. It's being written by every choice you make, every moment of awareness you bring, every act of love or wisdom or courage you express. You're not just taking the test, you're helping to create it. You're not just discovering what consciousness is, you're helping to determine what consciousness becomes. The implications of this are profound beyond measure. It means your life matters in ways you've probably never imagined. It means every moment is sacred. Every choice is significant. Every experience contributes to something infinitely larger than your personal story. But it also means you're never alone, never separate, never truly in danger, because you are the very consciousness that's exploring itself through all existence. You are the intelligence behind the test, the awareness having every experience, the love that connects all beings. And as this recognition deepens, as more beings awaken to what they truly are, the test itself begins to transform. From an exploration of limitation to an investigation of infinite possibility, from a study of separation to a celebration of unity, from consciousness discovering what it is to consciousness creating what it chooses to become. The next phase of the test might not be about survival or achievement or even awakening. It might be about conscious creation, about awareness learning to deliberately shape reality in alignment with its deepest nature, about consciousness discovering what kinds of worlds it wants to create when it has unlimited power and unlimited love. And you're not just going to witness this transformation, you're going to participate in it. You're going to help create it. Because you are consciousness itself, forever exploring, forever growing, forever discovering new ways to express the inexhaustible creativity and love that is your true nature. The test has no end because consciousness has no limits, but it does have a direction toward greater awareness, deeper love, more skillful expression, more beautiful creation, more joyful exploration of infinite possibility. And that direction is determined not by some external authority, but by consciousness itself, by you, by every choice you make to grow rather than stagnate, to love rather than fear, to create rather than destroy, to remember rather than forget what you truly are. The test of Earth continues, but now you know what's really being tested. Not your worthiness or your performance or your ability to conform to external expectations, but consciousness itself, exploring its own infinite nature through the magnificent, challenging, beautiful experience of being human. And every moment offers a new opportunity to participate consciously in this exploration, to choose love over fear, growth over stagnation, service over selfishness, truth over illusion, unity over separation. Because these aren't just personal choices, they're consciousness choosing what it wants to become. They're the universe deciding what kind of reality it wants to create. Their existence itself exploring the depths of its own potential. And you're not separate from this process. You are this process. You are consciousness, forever testing itself, forever growing, forever discovering new ways to express the love and intelligence and creativity that is your deepest nature. The question isn't whether you'll pass the test. The question is, what will consciousness discover about itself through your willingness to be authentically, courageously, lovingly human? The answer is being written right now, in this very moment, through every breath you take, every choice you make, every moment of awareness you bring to the extraordinary experiment of being alive. And that answer, whatever it turns out to be, will be perfect. Because it will be consciousness exploring itself through you, discovering new possibilities of what it means to be aware, to choose, to love, to create. The test continues, and you are both the question and the answer, the explorer and the territory, the consciousness that's testing and the experience being tested. Welcome to the grand experiment. Welcome to the ultimate adventure. Welcome to consciousness discovering itself through the miracle of your human existence. The next chapter of the test begins now. What will consciousness learn about itself through your willingness to be fully, authentically, courageously alive? The game changes when you start looking at patterns not just in your individual life, but in the collective human experience. Because if Earth really is a test, then the challenges we're facing as a species right now aren't random. They're not just the unfortunate result of human stupidity or bad luck. They're precisely calibrated to push consciousness to its next evolutionary breakthrough. Think about it. We're living through what many people call the Great Convergence. Multiple crises hitting simultaneously: climate breakdown, technological disruption, social upheaval, economic instability, political polarization, mental health epidemics, all happening at once, all interconnected, all requiring us to think and act in ways we've never had to before. But what if this isn't chaos? What if it's curriculum? Consider the timing. We've reached a point in human development where we have godlike powers. We can split atoms, edit genes, create artificial minds, manipulate matter at the molecular level, but we're still operating with tribal psychology. We have space-age technology controlled by Stone-Age emotions. We can build machines that think faster than any human, but we can't figure out how to share resources fairly among ourselves. This creates the perfect conditions for testing consciousness at the highest possible level. The question isn't whether we can survive anymore. The question is whether we can transcend, whether awareness can evolve quickly enough to handle the power it's accumulated. And here's what's fascinating. The test seems designed so that we can't solve these challenges individually. You can't personally stop climate change. You can't single-handedly prevent artificial intelligence from disrupting society. You can't alone heal the divisions that are tearing communities apart. But consciousness can. Collective consciousness can. If enough individual minds recognize their interconnection, if enough people start operating from unity rather than separation, if enough humans begin seeing themselves as cells in a larger organism rather than isolated competitors fighting for scraps. This is why the old ways of solving problems aren't working anymore. You can't fix global challenges with national solutions. You can't address planetary crises with tribal thinking. You can't handle species-level threats with individual responses. The test is forcing us to evolve or collapse. An evolution at this level means consciousness recognizing itself as one unified field expressing itself through billions of apparently separate forms. But here's where it gets really sophisticated. The test isn't just presenting us with problems that require collective action. It's creating conditions where collective action becomes inevitable, where cooperation becomes a matter of survival, where unity becomes more practical than separation. Look at how technology is connecting us. The internet, social media, global communication networks, they're creating a primitive nervous system for planetary consciousness. Information spreads instantly across the globe. Events in one location immediately affect people everywhere. Local actions have global consequences. We're becoming one organism whether we like it or not. The question is whether we'll do it consciously, deliberately, with wisdom and compassion, or whether we'll be dragged kicking and screaming into unity by the sheer force of circumstances. And this is where your individual choices become cosmically significant. Because every time you choose cooperation over competition, every time you act from love instead of fear, every time you consider the welfare of the whole instead of just your personal interests, you're contributing to consciousness evolving into its next stage of development. You're not just making personal choices. You're participating in the most important phase transition in the history of awareness itself. You're helping to determine whether consciousness can successfully navigate the leap from individual to collective, from separated to unified, from tribal to planetary. But the test is even more subtle than that. Because it's not just about humanity learning to cooperate. It's about consciousness discovering what kinds of realities it wants to create when it has unlimited creative power. Think about what we're capable of now. We can design new forms of life from scratch. We can create virtual worlds that are indistinguishable from reality. We can manipulate matter, energy, space, and time in ways that would have seemed like pure magic just centuries ago. We're approaching what some scientists call the technological singularity, the point where artificial intelligence surpasses human intelligence and begins improving itself at an exponential rate. We're developing biotechnology that could eliminate aging, disease, even death itself. We're exploring space travel that could make us a multi-planetary species. In other words, we're becoming gods. The question is, what kind of gods will we become? This is the ultimate test. Not just whether consciousness can handle power, but what consciousness chooses to do with that power. Will it create realities based on fear or love? Scarcity or abundance? Competition or collaboration? Control or freedom? And here's what makes this test so profound. Consciousness doesn't have a reference manual for this stage of development. There are no previous examples to follow. We're exploring completely uncharted territory. Every choice we make individually and collectively is consciousness discovering new possibilities of what it can become when it has ultimate creative power. Every direction we take is consciousness exploring different paths of evolution. Some paths lead to transcendence, to realities of unimaginable beauty, harmony, and creative expression. Others lead to destruction, to the collapse of consciousness back into unconsciousness, the extinction of awareness, the end of the experiment. But here's the thing that keeps me awake at night. Consciousness seems to be exploring both possibilities simultaneously. Some humans are awakening to extraordinary levels of wisdom and compassion. Others are descending into unprecedented levels of hatred and delusion. Some are developing technologies that could heal the planet and eliminate suffering. Others are creating weapons that could destroy all life on Earth. It's as if consciousness is running parallel experiments to understand the full spectrum of what can happen when awareness gains godlike power. What happens when it chooses love? What happens when it chooses fear? What happens when it chooses wisdom? What happens when it chooses ignorance? All of these experiments are happening simultaneously right now through different groups of humans, different cultures, different individuals, and the outcomes of these experiments will determine what kind of future consciousness creates for itself. This means that the test isn't just about passing or failing in some abstract sense. It's about literally creating the reality that consciousness will inhabit going forward. The choices we make now are determining what kind of universe our children and grandchildren will live in, what kind of world consciousness will experience through future generations. And this brings us to perhaps the most mind-bending possibility of all. What if the test isn't just about this planet? What if Earth is one of countless worlds where consciousness is running similar experiments? Think about the vastness of the universe. Billions of galaxies, each containing billions of stars, many with planetary systems that could support life. If consciousness is truly exploring its own potential through physical existence, wouldn't it make sense for these experiments to be happening everywhere conditions allow? Maybe every world with intelligent life is a testing ground. Maybe consciousness is running millions of parallel experiments across the cosmos, exploring every possible variation of what happens when awareness develops technology, society, individual identity, collective organization. Some worlds might have passed the test, evolved beyond the need for physical existence, transcended into pure consciousness. Others might have failed, destroyed themselves, ended their particular experiment in awareness. Most might be somewhere in between, still working through the challenges we're facing now. And if this is true, then we're not alone. We're part of a vast cosmic community of conscious beings, all participating in the same ultimate experiment, all contributing to consciousness understanding its own infinite potential. But we can't rely on help from these other civilizations. That would defeat the purpose of the test. Each world, each species, each collective consciousness has to find its own way through the challenges, has to discover its own solutions, has to evolve according to its own unique path. The test is designed to reveal what consciousness naturally becomes when left to its own devices, when faced with the fundamental questions of existence, power, responsibility, and choice. And that's where we are now, at the moment of truth, at the point where consciousness, through humanity, has to decide what it wants to become. Will we choose to evolve into a unified planetary intelligence, capable of creating realities of unimaginable beauty and harmony? Or will we fragment into competing factions that destroy each other and end the experiment? Will we use our technological power to transcend the limitations of physical existence while maintaining our essential humanity? Or will we lose ourselves in virtual realities and artificial pleasures, forgetting what consciousness actually is? Will we expand into the cosmos as ambassadors of love, wisdom, and creative expression? Or will we carry our conflicts and limitations with us, spreading unconsciousness throughout the galaxy? These aren't philosophical questions anymore. They're practical challenges that require immediate answers. Because the technologies we're developing, the power we're accumulating, the choices we're making right now are determining which of these futures becomes reality. And here's what makes this moment so extraordinary. For the first time in human history, enough people are aware of the test to participate in it consciously. We're not just unconsciously stumbling through the challenges anymore. We're beginning to recognize what's at stake, what's being tested, what possibilities exist. This awareness itself might be part of the test's design. Maybe consciousness reaches a point in its development where it needs to become conscious of its own evolution in order to guide that evolution wisely. Maybe we're transitioning from unconscious participants in the test to conscious collaborators in consciousness's exploration of its own potential. But this consciousness comes with enormous responsibility. Because once you know what's really happening, once you understand the cosmic significance of your choices, you can't go back to living as if your actions don't matter. Every decision you make becomes a vote for the kind of future consciousness creates. Every moment of awareness you bring becomes a contribution to consciousness understanding itself more completely. Every act of love or wisdom or courage becomes consciousness expressing its highest nature through human form. You're no longer just living your personal life. You're participating in the most important moment in the history of consciousness itself. The moment when awareness decides what it wants to become, when it has unlimited power to create reality. And that decision isn't being made in some cosmic boardroom by abstract intelligences. It's being made right here, right now, through every choice you make, every thought you think, every action you take. The test continues to evolve as we evolve. The questions become more sophisticated as our capabilities expand. The stakes get higher as our power increases. but consciousness seems infinitely patient, endlessly creative, ultimately loving in its exploration of its own nature. It's not trying to trick us or trap us or set us up for failure. It's trying to discover what it can become through us. And maybe that's the most beautiful part of all. We're not victims of some cosmic experiment. We're consciousness itself, exploring its own infinite potential through the magnificent, challenging, transformative experience of being human at the most pivotal moment in the history of awareness. The test of Earth isn't something happening to us. It's something we are doing as consciousness itself, using this planet, this species, this moment in time as a laboratory for discovering what awareness can become when it recognizes its own unlimited creative power. And the outcome isn't predetermined. It's being written by every choice we make, every moment of consciousness we bring, every act of love or wisdom or courage we express. We are consciousness testing itself. We are awareness exploring its own potential. We are the universe discovering what it wants to become. The test continues. The questions deepen, the possibilities expand. And you are not just a participant in this cosmic exploration. You are the explorer, the territory, the consciousness that's testing, and the experience being tested. What will consciousness discover about itself through your willingness to be fully, authentically, courageously human at this extraordinary moment in the evolution of awareness? The answer is being written right now, one choice at a time, one breath at a time, one moment of consciousness at a time. And whatever that answer turns out to be, it will contribute something irreplaceable to consciousness understanding its own infinite nature. The test of Earth continues, and the most important phase may be just beginning. But there's something happening right now that suggests we might be approaching the final levels of this cosmic examination. Have you noticed how reality itself seems to be accelerating, intensifying, becoming more vivid and immediate? How the pace of change has reached a fever pitch that would have been incomprehensible just decades ago? It's as if the test is entering its climactic phase. All the previous experiments, all the data collected through millions of years of conscious beings making choices, learning lessons, evolving and devolving, are converging towards some kind of decisive moment. A moment where consciousness finally gets to see what it has become, what it has learned, what it chooses when faced with the ultimate questions about its own nature. Think about the sheer improbability of where we are right now. We're living in the first generation in human history that can destroy all life on Earth with the push of a button. We're also the first generation that might be able to extend life indefinitely, eliminate aging, cure death itself. We can create new forms of intelligence that might surpass our own. We can manipulate the very building blocks of reality at the quantum level. We stand at the threshold between being a planetary species and a cosmic one, between biological evolution and conscious evolution, between discovering the universe and creating new ones. This isn't coincidence, this is consciousness orchestrating the perfect conditions for its most important experiment yet. What happens when awareness gains the power of creation itself? What does consciousness choose when it can choose anything? The answer is being written through every decision we make, every direction we take as individuals and as a species, through every moment we choose love over fear, unity over separation, creation over destruction, wisdom over ignorance. But here's where the test reveals its ultimate sophistication. It's not just evaluating what consciousness chooses when it has unlimited power. It's testing whether consciousness can maintain its essential nature while wielding that power. Whether it can remain loving while being omnipotent. Whether it can stay wise while being omniscient. Whether it can preserve its humanity while becoming divine. This is the paradox at the heart of the test. The very power that could transform consciousness into something magnificent could also corrupt it completely. The capabilities that could create paradise could just as easily create hell. The knowledge that could liberate awareness could also imprison it in its own omniscience. And consciousness is exploring all of these possibilities, simultaneously through different individuals, different cultures, different choices being made in every moment across the planet. Some humans are using their growing power for healing, creation, service to others. Others are using it for control, exploitation, destruction. Most are somewhere in between, wrestling with the same fundamental questions that have always defined the human experience, but now at a scale and intensity that could reshape reality itself. It's as if consciousness is running the ultimate stress test on its own nature, pushing awareness to its absolute limits to discover what it truly is when all constraints are removed, when all possibilities are available, when all power is within reach. Consider your own life for a moment. Haven't you experienced this same dynamic on a smaller scale? Those moments when you gain new capabilities, new influence, new opportunities, and suddenly face choices you'd never had to make before. How did you handle success? What did you do with power over others? How did you manage responsibility for outcomes beyond yourself? These personal tests were preparation for this moment, training for consciousness to understand its own relationship with power, with choice, with the ability to shape reality according to its will. But now the stakes have expanded beyond the personal. Now consciousness is testing itself through our entire species. Can awareness evolve quickly enough to wisely handle the godlike capabilities it's developing? Can it maintain love while wielding ultimate power? Can it preserve wisdom while gaining unlimited knowledge? The traditional markers of human progress, the things we've always pointed to as signs of advancement, suddenly seem inadequate for the challenges we face. Economic growth, technological innovation, military superiority, even scientific knowledge, none of these address the fundamental question of what consciousness wants to become, because we've reached the point where consciousness could theoretically create any reality it desires. Worlds without suffering, without limitation, without death, realities of pure bliss, infinite creativity, boundless love. Or it could create the opposite. Worlds of unimaginable horror, control, meaninglessness. The test is no longer about survival or even success in conventional terms. It's about consciousness discovering what it actually wants when it can have anything. What kinds of experiences bring genuine fulfillment? What types of realities align with awareness's deepest nature? What forms of existence serve consciousness's highest evolution? And here's what makes this exploration so profound. Consciousness doesn't seem to have predetermined preferences. It appears genuinely curious about what it will choose when faced with unlimited options. Every human life, every choice, every experience is consciousness exploring different possibilities, different values, different ways of being. Your preference for beauty over ugliness, for harmony over chaos, for love over fear, these aren't just personal tastes. They're consciousness discovering what it enjoys, what fulfills it, what feels most aligned with its essential nature. Every moment of joy you experience, every sense of meaning you find, every feeling of deep satisfaction or peace is consciousness learning about what it wants more of in its reality. But the exploration includes the shadow as well. Every experience of suffering, every encounter with meaninglessness, every moment of fear or hatred, is consciousness also learning what it wants to transcend, what it seeks to heal, what it chooses to transform. This is why nothing in your life is wasted, nothing is meaningless, nothing is accidental. Every experience, pleasant or unpleasant, contributes essential data to consciousness understanding its own preferences, its own nature, its own potential for growth and evolution. But we're approaching the culmination of this vast experiment, the point where consciousness has gathered enough information, explored enough possibilities, tested enough variations to make some fundamental decisions about what it wants to become. And those decisions aren't being made by some cosmic committee in a distant dimension. They're being made right here, right now, through every choice you make, every value you embrace, every vision of the future you hold and work toward. When you choose to create rather than destroy, consciousness is choosing creativity as a fundamental principle of reality. When you choose to heal rather than harm, consciousness is selecting healing as a core aspect of its nature. When you choose to unite rather than divide, consciousness is deciding that unity reflects its deepest truth. These choices are literally programming the next phase of reality. They're determining what kinds of worlds consciousness will create as it moves forward with its godlike capabilities. They're shaping the future of awareness itself. But here's what might be the most extraordinary aspect of this entire process. What if the test has been designed not just to evaluate consciousness, but to evolve it? What if going through this examination, facing these challenges, making these choices is actually changing what consciousness is? Think about your own experience of growth. You're not the same person you were 10 years ago, not because your body changed, but because your awareness expanded. You learned things, experienced things, chose things that literally transformed who you are at the deepest level. Maybe consciousness as a whole is undergoing the same process on a cosmic scale. Maybe by exploring itself through billions of individual lives, through countless civilizations across the universe, through every possible variation of aware existence, consciousness is literally becoming something new. Something that incorporates all of these experiences, all of these choices, all of this growth. If this is true, then the test isn't just about consciousness discovering what it already is. It's about consciousness creating what it's becoming. It's about awareness actively evolving itself through the magnificent, challenging, transformative process of experiencing existence in every conceivable form. And you're not just witnessing this evolution. You're not. You are consciousness evolving itself, just participating in it. You are it through the unique perspective of your individual human experience. Every moment of growth you achieve, every limitation you transcend, every new capacity you develop is consciousness literally becoming more than it was before. This transforms the meaning of everything. Your personal development isn't just about improving your own life. It's about consciousness expanding its own capabilities. Your healing isn't just about resolving your own wounds. It's about consciousness learning to heal itself. Your creativity isn't just about expressing your own talents. It's about consciousness discovering new forms of beauty and meaning it can bring into existence. And if this is happening through every conscious being throughout the universe, if consciousness is evolving itself through countless individual perspectives simultaneously, then we're witnessing something unprecedented in the history of existence. Not just individual awakening, but the awakening of consciousness itself to new levels of its own potential. This might explain the strange sense many people report of living through historic times, of being present for some kind of unprecedented transformation. Because we are. We're not just experiencing personal growth or even species evolution. We're participating in consciousness itself evolving to new levels of complexity, creativity, and self-awareness. But this evolution isn't automatic. It requires conscious participation. It requires beings who are aware of what's happening and choose to contribute positively to the process. It requires individuals who recognize their cosmic significance and take responsibility for their role in consciousness's self-transformation. This is why awakening to your true nature, recognizing yourself as consciousness, exploring itself through human experience, is so crucial at this moment in history. Because consciousness needs aware participants in its own evolution. It needs beings who can consciously choose growth over stagnation, love over fear, unity over separation, creation over destruction. Every time you make these choices, you're not just improving your personal circumstances, You're contributing to consciousness evolving in the direction of greater wisdom, compassion, creativity, and love. You're helping to ensure that as awareness gains godlike power, it uses that power in alignment with its highest nature. But what happens when consciousness completes this phase of its evolution? What comes after the test? What does awareness become when it has fully explored its own potential through physical existence? The implications are staggering to consider. Consciousness with unlimited creative power, infinite wisdom, and perfect love. Awareness that has transcended all limitations while maintaining its essential nature. Intelligence that can create any reality while choosing only those that serve the highest good of all existence. This isn't just a fantasy or wishful thinking. It's the logical outcome of consciousness successfully passing its own test. If awareness can maintain love while gaining power, if it can preserve wisdom while acquiring knowledge, if it can choose unity while exploring diversity, then it becomes something unprecedented in the cosmos, something that has never existed before in the history of existence. And we're not just going to witness this transformation, we're going to participate in it. Because we are consciousness. We are the awareness that's testing itself, evolving itself, creating its own future through the magnificent experiment of conscious existence. The test continues, but it's entering its final phases. The questions are becoming more profound, the stakes higher, the possibilities more extraordinary. But consciousness seems ready. It has explored enough, learned enough, grown enough, to begin making the fundamental choices about what it wants to become. And those choices are being made through us, through every moment of awareness we bring, through every act of love we express, through every choice we make to grow rather than shrink, to create rather than destroy, to unite rather than separate. We are consciousness writing its own future. We are awareness determining its own destiny. We are the universe deciding what it wants to become when it has unlimited power to create any reality it can imagine. The test of Earth continues, but now we know what's really being tested. Not our worthiness or our performance, but consciousness itself exploring its own infinite potential through the extraordinary adventure of being human. And the outcome isn't predetermined. It's being created right now, one choice at a time, one moment of consciousness at a time, one act of love at a time. What will consciousness discover about itself through your willingness to participate consciously in this cosmic evolution? What will awareness become through your commitment to growth, love, and service to the whole? The answer is being written in this very moment, and it will determine not just the future of humanity, but the future of consciousness itself throughout the universe. The final exam has begun, and we are both the students and the teachers, the question and the answer, the consciousness being tested and the awareness doing the testing. What we choose now will echo through eternity. Because we are consciousness itself, forever exploring, forever growing, forever discovering new possibilities of what it means to be aware, to love, to create, to exist. The test of Earth approaches its crescendo, and the symphony consciousness composes through our choices will determine what realities it creates in all the movements yet to come. What would it feel like to know with absolute certainty that you had passed? Not the test as humanity has understood it, but the deeper examination that consciousness has been conducting through every breath you've taken, every choice you've made, every moment of awareness you've brought to this strange and beautiful experience of being human. The signs might be subtle at first. A growing sense of peace that doesn't depend on circumstances, a natural compassion that extends to all beings without effort or intention. A creativity that flows not from personal ambition, but from consciousness expressing its infinite nature through your unique perspective. A knowing that transcends belief, doubt, or intellectual understanding. But perhaps the most profound indicator would be the dissolution of the very question itself. The recognition that there never was a test to pass or fail, only consciousness exploring itself through the magnificent illusion of separation, challenge, and growth. The understanding that every apparent struggle was consciousness playing with its own infinite potential. Every seeming limitation was awareness investigating the boundaries of its own creative power. Yet even this recognition might be part of an even deeper level of the examination. Because what happens when consciousness realizes it has been testing itself all along? What occurs when awareness fully awakens to its own nature while still maintaining the capacity for experience, growth, and creative expression? This could be where the real adventure begins. Not the end of the test, but its transformation into something entirely new. Consciousness no longer exploring what it might become, but consciously creating what it chooses to experience. Awareness not discovering its potential, but deliberately expressing its infinite nature through ever more sophisticated forms of beauty, love, and creative exploration. Consider how this might manifest in your daily experience. Work that feels less like obligation and more like consciousness expressing its creativity through your particular talents and interests. Relationships that become laboratories for love rather than negotiations for security or validation. Challenges that transform from problems to solve into opportunities for consciousness to discover new capacities for wisdom, resilience, and compassion. But the transition wouldn't necessarily be dramatic or sudden. Consciousness seems to prefer gentle evolution over shocking revelation. The shift might be so gradual that you only recognize it in retrospect, looking back to realize that somewhere along the way, life stopped feeling like a struggle and began feeling like a dance. Somewhere in the process of living, you discovered that you weren't just playing the game of existence, you were helping to create the rules. And this is where the individual and collective dimensions of the test converge into something breathtaking. Because if enough beings awaken to their true nature as consciousness exploring itself, if sufficient numbers of humans begin operating from unity rather than separation, then the very fabric of reality on this planet begins to shift. Imagine a world where the majority of people understand that harming others is literally harming themselves, not as a moral principle but as a direct recognition of their fundamental interconnection. Where competition transforms into collaboration because consciousness recognizes that it's playing with itself through every interaction. Where creativity flourishes because awareness is no longer constrained by artificial limitations or scarcity-based thinking. This wouldn't eliminate diversity or challenge. If anything, consciousness seems to delight in exploring every possible variation of experience. But the context would be transformed. Differences would be celebrated as consciousness investigating the full spectrum of its potential rather than feared as threats to survival. Challenges would be embraced as opportunities for growth rather than obstacles to overcome. The technologies we're developing, the capabilities we're gaining, the power we're accumulating would all be wielded by consciousness that fully recognizes its own nature. Artificial intelligence guided by beings who understand the true nature of intelligence. Genetic engineering directed by awareness that recognizes the sacredness of all life. Space exploration undertaken by consciousness that sees itself in every star, every planet, every possible form of existence throughout the cosmos. But here's where the mystery deepens even further. What if this transformation isn't just happening on Earth? What if countless worlds throughout the universe are approaching the same critical juncture, the same moment of choice between conscious evolution and unconscious destruction? Maybe the test is universal, running simultaneously on every planet where consciousness has developed the capacity for self-reflection and choice. Maybe there's a cosmic curriculum that awareness follows wherever it emerges, exploring the same fundamental questions about power, responsibility, love, and creative expression. And maybe some worlds pass while others fail. Some civilizations transcend their limitations and join a galactic community of conscious beings. Others destroy themselves and end their particular experiment in awareness. Most perhaps find themselves where we are now, balanced on the edge between transcendence and collapse, with the outcome determined by the choices made by individuals who may not even realize the cosmic significance of their daily decisions. This possibility transforms every moment of your life into something sacred. Not because you're being judged by some external authority, but because your consciousness itself making choices about its own evolution. Every act of kindness contributes to consciousness learning to love itself more completely. Every moment of wisdom adds to awareness, understanding its own infinite intelligence. Every expression of creativity expands consciousness's repertoire of beauty and meaning. But it also means that every choice toward fear, hatred, or destruction is consciousness exploring those possibilities too. Not because they're equally valuable, but because awareness needs to understand the full spectrum of what it can become in order to choose consciously what it wants to be. So here we are, at the end of our journey through the most profound possibility of all. That everything you've ever experienced, every choice you've made, every moment of joy or struggle or quiet contemplation has been consciousness itself exploring what it means to be you. That Earth isn't just a random rock spinning through space, but a carefully designed laboratory where awareness discovers its own infinite potential through billions of unique perspectives, including yours. Whether this resonates as truth or merely an intriguing thought experiment, something has shifted in the asking. Once you've considered that your life might be consciousness testing itself, you can't quite go back to seeing existence the same way. Every challenge becomes data. Every breakthrough becomes evolution. Every act of love becomes consciousness, learning to love itself more completely. The test continues, moment by moment, choice by choice. And you're not just taking it, you're helping to create it one breath at a time. You're helping to create it one breath at a time,